CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy. After 2 years and more than 80 episodes of our Conversations on African Philanthropy, we are introducing a series of conversations that are theme-specific, program-focused, and at times recorded at the request of those at the coalface of implementation in order to document and tell their experiences and stories. In the first of such series, we focus on the Zimbabwe Alliance Initiative, whose grants, convenings, capacity building, and technical support have fostered a vibrant civil society, where partners were empowered to design innovative and coordinated responses that amplify the voices of those marginalized, influence the capacity of citizens to mobilize around national critical issues, engage with policymakers, and built regional and international solidarity in pursuit of a better Zimbabwe. Formed in 2010 to strengthen the role of civil society in influencing Zimbabwe's transition to democracy, the Alliance has evolved over several phases to what it is today. An initiative of several partners, Zimbabwe Alliance is a story of resilience, innovation, dedication, and passion expressed somewhat beautifully in some of the least expected places and ways.
Welcome to yet another special edition of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Moyo. In this segment of our podcast, we are discussing the Zimbabwe Alliance Initiative, a donor collaborative framework that was put in place around 2008-2009 to deal with the context and situation in Zimbabwe, which was brought about by the crisis which led to a government of national unity. And the majority of these partners and donors wanted to strengthen the resilience of civil society towards the democratic Zimbabwe. I'm excited to be joined today by Daniel Maposa, who is the founder and executive director of Savannah Trust. Daniel, welcome to the Conversations.
Thank you, Big.
At some point, we'll also be speaking to Sebastian, who is a communications officer here at Savannah Trust. Sebastian, welcome as well.
Thank you for having me, Peggy.
Thank you so much. Daniel, I think before we came on set, I was saying to you that this initiative was introduced as a way of strengthening civil society, but recognizing the different elements that civil society takes in terms of shapes and formats, but also expressions. And you run a theater organization.
Yes.
Could you tell us a bit about why you founded Savannah Trust, when it was founded, and what the objectives then were in setting it up? We'll then look at its evolution till today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Becky, and thank you for having me here speak about Savannah Trust. Savannah Trust was founded in 2006, first as a theatre organization that was looking at how we can promote issues of human rights and democracy in Zimbabwe, but also running in tandem with the other work of a theatre organization, producing work for theatres and for the consumption of the general public. However, the aspect of using theatre in community development work was the biggest goal of Savannah Trust. And it so happened that at that particular time when it was founded, Zimbabwe was facing challenges around issues of human rights, good governance and democracy. And we said as an organization, how can we as an arts sector using creative expression contribute to the discourse around human rights, governance and democracy? But also beyond that, how can we raise awareness among us citizens, particularly those in rural areas? You remember that time around 2006, 2007, there was not much of internet just like now, although it has improved in rural areas. So some things would happen in Harare, and There's places like Gwanda, like Muzarabani, Mturashanga, they would not know what's happening.
Yeah.
So we decided to make theatre the accessible form of communication and awareness raising in communities, so that people can be aware of their rights, but they can also, through our work, begin to discuss and dialogue around issues of human rights, good governance and democracy in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and so perhaps we could move to maybe talking about some of the key programmatic focus areas that Savannah Trust is focusing on now, and if you have made any pivots from maybe some areas that we are looking at inception, you could also relate to that. But I really want us to deepen the conversation on the key programmatic pillars of Savannah Trust.
Yeah. Savannah Trust is, as I said, it works in a dual way. The cultural and creative aspect and the social development work. So the cultural and creative aspect, which is one pillar, we work around building the skills and knowledge of the theatre practitioners, around skills in play production, in theatre making, in arts management and development. But also that is also linked to the social development aspect, where we work around issues of human rights and governance, work around issues of climate justice and just transition, and also issues of gender equality. So those are the major pillars that we work with in our social development or community development work. Around those pillars, we also use community artists and community theatre groups, whom we train as creatives that are into social activism, or training them in theatre for development, so that they can be able to articulate issues on human rights, governance, climate justice and just transitions in their specific communities. So we do a lot of capacity building. We have a network of community theatre groups and community artists that we work with in different areas, so that they can also contribute to the human rights and governance discourse, as well as to climate change.
Yeah. You know, I'm excited to be talking to you, Daniel, because more often the arts sector, in your case theatre, is usually seen only from the perspective of entertainment. But you have already started talking about the developmental component of arts, and in this case theatre. You are a scholar yourself. We're talking about your PhD thesis before coming on set. I want us to use this opportunity to theorize and in a way begin to show the developmental component of the arts sector, so that it's not continually taken only for purposes of entertainment, because we know it's actually not. I mean, the kind of issues that you were talking about are very existential questions of development, whether you're looking at climate change. How do you bring in development and climate change using theatre? You were talking about human rights and governance. How do you use theatre and any other art form to actually address those things? And you know, after that, I would want to ask you, Sebastian, to talk to us about how you actually are able to then communicate that to those that are beyond the immediate constituency that you work with. But let's start with the theorization.
Well, theatre, looking at it from an African perspective, is not just theatre for theatre's sake. Traditionally, theatre was used to inform, was used to, to entertain, but not only entertain, but entertaining with a message in it. I know lot of people have written about theatre for development, but also you know from Brazil there is Augusto Boal with Theatre of the Oppressed, all trying to make sure, nowadays it's called applied theatre, using the various forms of participatory and interactive theatre to raise awareness, but beyond awareness, to raise consciousness among the citizens so that they can contribute to social discourse and development. So our kind of theatre is derived from those perspectives, the Augusto Boal perspective, and also the Theatre for Development, which was actually started in Africa, in Botswana, with Liza Batanane at Botswana University. So ours, we try to call it hybrid kind of theatre that takes into cognizance the context of Zimbabwe and the context of Africa, to say how can we, during the War of Liberation there was Pungwe theatre for mobilization and passing on messages. How do we use traditional forms of theatre to begin to engage our communities? How can we tap into indigenous knowledge systems with our theatre? And when we are speaking about human rights and democracy, we then do not just in our theatre take them as people would want Western concepts, but to say what are the issues and how was it in our context? How did we discuss issues of human rights and democracy? Because it was there, and we try to take cognizance of that indigenous and traditional knowledge system and merge it with the current narratives and methodologies around democracy, good governance, so that we can be relevant in our communities. So even when we are speaking about climate change, we are not just in our theatre taking it from a book or academic perspective, but also trying to say how are our experiencing climate change? How would our people want to live in our communities when we speak about human rights, the issues of respect, the issues of values, the issues of norms? As now when we go to the Constitution, those are just things that are interpreted on paper at a constitutional level, what we want as Zimbabweans. So our theatre, even when we are producing it and when we are working in communities, comes from that perspective to say, how do we understand issues of human rights as a people, issues of democracy as Zimbabweans? How do we want to live together and see a developed and a peaceful society? So from that perspective, that is how we then theorize our theatre and make sure that our approaches are pro-communities, pro-people, and facilitate facilitate discussions that our people would aspire for when they are in their communities.
So Dennis, I would want us to zoom in on to Sebastian on one of the cameras, if possible. If you could now focus on him. I want us, Sebastian, to move it from the theoretical side of things to the practicalities. So theatre on its own is already a big form of communication, and we can't compete with theatre as a form of communication. It appeals to, to the masses, it appeals to the audience, but also it's almost real-time, absorption of the messages that, people want to engage and absorb at that particular moment. But, taking all these theoretical elements around human rights, around governance, etc., and you are tasked with having to communicate that widely, especially in the era of technology, AI and others. Help us understand how, as a young person yourself, somebody who is in this space, are able to break those messages in a way that is relatable to the common people on the ground, in a way that also positions theatre not just as a tool for entertainment, but as a tool for development. And if you have got specific examples, practical ones, that you want to use as testimonials, please do so.
Thank you so much, Peggy, for this opportunity. I think to begin with, when you are in a role such as mine, working for an arts organization, specifically a performing arts organization, like I said, or like you have elaborated earlier, is that most of the communications, they are done in real time, where the audience or the participants are there. And when we look at an organization like Savannah Trust, where, like Daniel Maposa had mentioned, we have the cultural and creative industry side, where we do what we call mainstream theater, which is a process of sometimes we bring creative people in the space, they give us a script, we act and we perform. But so the marketing or the communication of that is done within the bracket of marketing, because we sell that content. It's our creativity that we are taking out there. It might have these issues of human rights, but we are selling a product. So when we look at the marketing of it now, we're not talking about how do we use social media, how do we use posters, how do we use radio, newspapers to communicate that there is a particular show that is coming through on this day. And that's where we use professional theater venues like the Reps Theater, Bulawayo Theater, Charles Austin. That's something that will be standing on its own as a creative production. But when we now look at the social development side of it, everything now begins to change, because now you have to look at which community am I addressing now. And like what Daniel Maposa had elaborated earlier, mostly our work or our target audience are marginalized people, people that are found within the rural community. So the best way that we have seen that we can reach to them, number one, is physical. We have to go into the space, and even our productions, they are not coming from what we think is what is on the ground. It tells a lot of research, going to the spaces, like talking with the community member. What are the problems here? What do you think are the solutions here? We go to the chiefs, to the traditional leaders, we go to the councils. They give us information. So whatever that we will then communicate with them is something also that they can relate to, because of the sense that it is not us telling them what to do, but it's them feeding us with the information to communicate. And you'd find here in Zimbabwe, when you want to deal with the rural community, I think the best digital way to do it is through radio. Yeah. Because in Zimbabwe, radio is the largely consumed mode of media. Because if we talk about internet Starlink, you might find that our target audience that doesn't have access to that. So as Savannah Trust, we also use a strategy of using radio dramas. Sometimes where we cannot physically go there and perform, we then use a radio drama that people can then now do call-ins. They can call, we heard you talking about that character who was doing this. We feel like we think that, even the mapping of the solutions, they start to happen on the ground. And maybe, if I may add on to what Mr. Maposa might have said, maybe for trying to be humble, when we look at the culture and creative side, Savannah Trust has done so many productions that have been recognized internationally, and we have won over 5 accolades, NAMA productions, which is specifically designed not for human rights or anything, but for celebrating cultural and creative work. But when we also go towards the social development work, Savannah Trust has twice won the Human Rights Arts Award for its recognition in pushing the agenda of human rights. 2 years ago, they won the Climate Change Arts Award in recognition of the amount of work that they are doing of using arts to push the agenda of climate change. So the reason why these things come is because also you are interacting and you are doing them with the right people and the right stakeholders. So when we do a lot of community work, we also go to organizations that we know that they are not creative, but they're technical. How, as an organization, do we begin to forge relationships with those organizations so that we can deliver our message to be so much effective? I'm not sure.
That does it. So actually, I'm excited about what you just mentioned, both of you, about the way in which you are almost in touch with what's happening, not just at community level, but globally. So, for example, the interface between theatre and climate change. Maybe we can just take that on its own and demonstrate how you have done it. So, how have you worked on climate change? Because this is one of the big areas as we speak, but also going forward. I mean, if we think COVID was an epidemic of or a pandemic of catastrophic levels, climate change is on another level. So, but you're already working in that space as artists, as theatre. So maybe we can deepen the discussion on how, for example, you take climate change and use it as a way of developing scripts or whatever it is, and for what message. So maybe we can start with you, Daniel, then we can go to Sebastian.
Yeah, Sebastian will speak to the documentaries
Yeah.
and other things. But what we've done is he spoke about research. Because climate change in its current form, the discourse is more technical. I think people in academia and in science would understand quite a lot about climate change. So at Savannah Trust, we invest a lot in a lot of research, reading documents, simplifying them, understanding the policies, understanding the Paris Agreement, and even participating in some climate change conferences at that level to try and equip ourselves, because we are creatives. So the first thing that we must do is for us, the creatives, to understand the whole subject.
Yeah.
And when we have understood, our creative team goes to the community, or whatever community we choose. Like previously, we went to Chimanimani and Marange, and surrounding farms in Mashonaland, and ask people how climate change. Sometimes they don't understand what climate change is, how they are being affected by the droughts in Chimanimani, by Cyclone Idai, the floods, and in different locations, how they are affected. When we come from there, we have all this data and information that we have researched from the communities, also with the data that we would have collected from the documents and from talking to experts within the climate change sector. And then we create a production. That after creation, we then do what we call a preview, call the stakeholders, some from the community, some from the experts and the like. And then they also input into the production. So this is our production process, and then we roll it out into the community. But also our production is not one size fits all. For example, working in Chimanimani, issues are not around heat waves, it's around the floods. How do you make sure that you interpret issues of floods to climate change? How do you make sure that when you are in Wange, you speak about relevant issues? It's a place where you can't grow maize, you can't grow crops in Binga. It's hot. How do you begin to link people's everyday lives to the science that is happening in a simplified manner? But also leaving space for people to deepen their discussions during the performance and after the performance. That is the process that we do. So we've been to Chimanimani, we've been to Marange, we've been to Wange, to Binga, and many other areas, speaking about issues of climate change, wanting people, to understand the aspect of climate change so that they can also plan. And to deepen conversation, not only amongst themselves, but as he said, we call them other stakeholders, like from the rural district councils, the chiefs, the government officials, and they begin to answer these technical questions when the audience is asked. In Marange, we had agri-tax department answering questions around agriculture in relation to climate change, and also the traditional leaders giving us the indigenous knowledge around how they used to preserve the environment or to protect the environment. All those issues, that is the kind of work that we have done. But we have also done pre-COP performances. In this one, we call in the civic society organizations and climate change, and also the government itself, to say when they are going to the COPs, these are the issues that they must take. So we call that decision makers performances, also trying to influence policy and trying to influence actions within different levels of government. From the physical aspect, that is our work in climate change. And I think Saba can speak to the documentary on Cyclone and other initiatives.
So I think what we can do, Sebastian, is to highlight some of these productions. So there's climate change, but you also have other areas, human rights and whatever. So let's highlight some of those that you think they've got the possibility of amplifying the work that you are doing, and where possible, if there's a way in which you can also talk about the impact of those productions, you could do so.
All right. So maybe I'll respond this looking at how are we maybe packaging or disseminating our productions and our the information and the research that we gathered. I think as an organization, I don't know whether I can call this, it's a model that or it's a belief that we have. Number one, we are guided by or with the belief of inclusion, where we do a thorough analysis of the context that we live in, and we understand the differences that we have, those that are in Harare versus those that are in Binga versus those that are in Chimanimani. Because of our geographical setup, we are different. So you'd find that in packaging, for example, we do a lot of work in climate change. We do also a lot of work in wildlife conservation and sustainable management, where we went to Wange and Binga and we dealt with issues around wildlife crimes and human-wildlife conflict. So when we package that, as an organization, like what I've said before, we understand that doing a documentary and posting it online might probably be accessible to people that have internet or mobile cell phones. So it means when we say inclusion, there are people that we have left out. So that's when we then package that into a production that we physically now take into the affected community, so that they can also see how climate change, how human wildlife conflict is affecting them. So in that respect, some of the things that we've done a documentary around wildlife crimes, which we screened at Crown Plaza, and it was a strategic screening, because we took people that were from the affected area. We took members of the government and we took members of the civil society. We placed them in that room, we showcased that documentary, and we said, what can be done? You understand? So from then you begin to understand opinions and suggestions coming from different places. Also, as an organization, what we believe is like we do not want a top to bottom approach, because when you look at the subject of climate change, like what he was saying, it's too technical. It's only for those who can read, who are illiterate, who can understand the jargon and the terminology. But what of my grandmother who is in Berengwa? What are the chances that she'll understand what anthropogenic activities are? Chances are limited. So as creatives now, we then turn that language, we simplify it, and we take it to my grandmother in a language and in a manner that she can relate to and understand. Once she's done with that, we have gathered the information. We now take the information to the stakeholders. So now you find that there's now fluidity in the top to bottom, bottom to up approach, because we have the information from the ground. We put members of the civil society and the government in a space. We tell them this is what the community is doing. We take what the government is saying in terms of adaptation, mitigation, and awareness. Guys, the government is saying for us to survive this is what we should do. So you'd find that there becomes like a good flow of information between those that are at the bottom and those that are at the top. Yeah, so I think that is the model and the belief that we have been using to try and bring out our production and our communication models.
Also, in terms of impact, I think I would speak to a case success story in Wedza, where in terms of service delivery and good governance, where we, as you know, there are always problems between the councils and the citizens, and the council wants the citizens to pay the rates, and the council or the citizens saying we can't pay we because they are not providing the service. So in Wedza it was a governance project. So we took the council, Wedza Rural District Council, to the community, and we did our performances, our interactive performances. At one point, the people in the community did not want to be addressed by the DA or the council officials. They were really bad from addressing them. But when we did the performance, they had an opportunity of answering questions from the community, because the community was saying their council, the councillors, and the government are doing nothing in this particular community. This also provided an opportunity for the council to begin to interact with the citizens, understand what they want. But one of the things, the outcomes that we wanted was for the community and the council in the next budget year to decide on one priority project for the community. So that process came up with a priority project, which was a mother's shelter for the pregnant mothers. And I can confirm that the following year the council budgeted for it, and it was built. This is one of evidence that was there. And but also talking to council, this project was done around 2019, 2020, 2021. But talking to council also, you begin to realize that they had improved inflow of payments. And this also building of the mother's shelter also motivated the residents to interact more and to pay to the council. And also now there is more interaction between the council and in that particular ward. From a governance point of view, I think this is one of the impact that we can speak to.
So it actually takes us back to the earlier discussion around arts and development. So what I'm hearing is that, you know, in most cases people would expect that as Savannah Trust working in the arts sector, your interest will be changing or influencing policy, budgeting for the arts. But here you are talking about using the arts to influence budgeting and policies in a different, complete area. You know, women and shelters, but also so you can even go to the agriculture, use arts to actually influence budgeting and policy. You go to different sectors. So that, I mean, that's the point that I'm getting from this, because the notion traditionally is that, you know, the arts sector, and therefore everything is within the arts sector. But you seem to have transformed that.
Yeah, we are inside looking. At some level we do those advocacies around arts policy. As an individual, I'm also very vocal around that, the investment in the arts and the policies around the arts. I think at government level, I'm known for that, for advocating at different policies. But for our community work, because we also believe that if all these other issues are taken care of,
Yeah.
then our
Yeah.
arts
Yeah.
will also be taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
It cannot be just one in an island.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and also we live in communities where we need services,
Yeah.
even as
Yeah.
artists, even as what. So when we advocate for policy change, we are also advocating for the artists to begin
Yeah.
to enjoy
Right,
their rights
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
just
So-
like any community member.
Yeah, so the entry point to this was to lay out, the context, the background, the work of Savannah Trust. But one of my key interests was your association with Trust Africa and ZimAlliance Initiative. I think around 2018 or so, you got a small grant to support with the work around how we could use theatre to deal with national dialogues and all of that, but around issues of governance and human rights. Maybe we can talk a bit about what came out of that support, and I mean, if the grant was catalytic, how was it catalytic? But I know it's just a small contribution to the good work that Savannah Trust is doing. But maybe if you could speak a bit to that small component of the contribution.
Thank you. Yeah. In 2017, we produced one of our successful plays, which was called Liberation, just before we want to go politically correct, we say
famous,
state assisted. What is it?
The state assisted coup. What was it called? Something like that. Something like that. It had a very trendy.
When we were dealing with criminals around
Yeah.
the president.
Those were surrounding the president.
Yeah. Prior to that,
Yeah.
some few months before that, we had produced a play called Liberation. This was, I think, in the cultural and creative sector, a big production.
Yeah.
And we had done also a partnership with fellow artists from South Africa, because we had conceived this to say, how do we contribute to national dialogue in terms of the governance issues that we are facing as a country? So we're speaking about these issues from a young person's perspective, how they are interacting with the governance of the country. So the key question was the governance of Zimbabwe, the challenges that we are facing, particularly faced by young people. And we pitched this production at a very high level,
Yeah.
not at a community level.
Yeah.
So we produced this production, did a few performances, also did the Haifa performances. And after every performance, we were having requests for other performances. And I remember in 2018 again, we performed for an all civic society performance, because it was tackling the national question,
Yeah.
which was on the leadership of the country.
Right.
So we, with other people that saw the production, they assisted us, and also we invited Trust Africa into it, and they felt it was an important production that was tackling the current national question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they asked us what we wanted to do with the production, and we said we wanted to take this production to different localities,
Right.
to begin to discuss at a very high level, just like what other civic society organizations do, at a high level with our theater.
Yeah.
So Liberation was taken to all the major towns in Zimbabwe, about 7 or so. Bulawayo, Mutare, Masvingo, Gweru, Harare, and other places, to mainstream theaters as well.
Yeah.
And we were using those platforms, but in each and every of those localities, we would do high density performances in public halls. And it was very interesting that different people attended. You know, touring with the productions in Zimbabwe is very difficult.
Yeah.
Because one of the financing, two of the spaces, hiring the spaces,
Yeah.
but also issues around censorship as well.
Right.
So this particular production managed to break, with the support from Trust Africa, managed to break those challenges and barriers, because it was also a production that had high-level experienced actors. So one of the things that we managed to do was to discuss from the community level to the highest level issues of the governance of the country at that particular point. 2017, 2018 as well. Because when we took it even to 2018, it was because what had changed were faces, and things had not really changed in the country. So we had an opportunity to discuss and to dialogue with the different stakeholders at different levels with that particular production, and I think it became very popular. In country, it was one of our most touring productions. And whilst we made it for the theaters, we also were able to adapt that production for the ordinary person in Murewa. I think it assisted us quite a lot in reaching out to different communities, because it is always difficult to get these high quality productions to the communities because of the challenges that we face around funding in the arts sector, for example.
In fact, I was going to end by asking you a question around funding and support, because more often, like I said in the beginning, you know, theater, arts is almost seen as performance, and also because at times there's possibilities to charge fees for attendance. The funding landscape usually doesn't really gets channeled, so there's not a lot of money that goes into the arts. Simply because of misconceptions that maybe you might be charging fees, or that you are just doing performance for entertainment, whereas you are actually doing exactly what your other mainstream NGOs are doing. You are actually tackling issues of national importance, you are tackling issues of policy, etc. So I wanted you to talk a bit about what the funding landscape is for your work, broadly as the arts, but also for the Savannah Trust.
Let me start by, broadly, in Zimbabwe, there is no proper funding that is directed towards the arts, probably except for small grants from the Culture Fund of Zimbabwe, but also it's coming from the EU and also the US embassies started doing small grants as well to creatives. But from the government side, unlike in other countries, like in South Africa, for example, next door, in Zambia, they've started also supporting the arts. There is no funding. We have had promises since 2018 that the government will create through the National Arts Council Arts Development Fund. Up to now, it has not been implemented. Even in our cultural policy, it is mentioned, but it has not been implemented. Year in and out, we are talking about it. So funding for the arts in Zimbabwe is very, very minimal. And if it is there, it is very small grants. What would you do with $2,000? With $5,000 for real institutions which want to produce work and to do good work? That is the status in the funding fraternity of Zimbabwe. But also when we come to the work that we do, community work that we do, social development, we have to work 20 times better than other civil society organizations because of that thinking that theatre is entertainment, arts is entertainment.
Yeah.
So even I remember sitting, having a meeting with one funder, saying to me, Daniel, I don't think theatre works. And I said, my God, why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the perception is that theatre is just for entertainment, and our other social development and critical work is not recognized.
Yeah.
Only for a few now who are beginning to understand the work that we are doing.
Yeah.
We are also beginning to go into spaces, and as Savannah Trust, we've made sure that we go into spaces and articulate the role of theatre, particularly in dealing with social, political, and economic issues. So we've been facing quite a lot of challenges around issues of funding, but luckily for Savannah Trust, there are some who are beginning to believe in our work, and some who have funded us for more than 5 years now. Though they are not big grants, but we've made sure that we correctly utilize those resources. But because the other issue also is not only in that theatre does not work, but also in the thinking that theatre organizations are informal and they are not able to account. Those are big issues. So when we are asked these questions, people begin to think we are fly-by-night activists. But here we are, Savannah Trust, more than 17 years in operation, and always having our audits playing, being assessed and giving out impactful work to communities. And I think in some donors that we have interacted with, the perception is beginning to change. But then what has been difficult is unlocking those bigger resources to begin to effectively and continuously do our work like what other mainstream big civic society organizations are doing. It's a lot of work, and it's work that we are committed to, and that we've committed to ourselves to continue to. But also it is from the passion. The beautiful thing about the one that we have is that we have the passion for the arts, but also passion for development. So it's double passion. Because if you lack passion, so in this particular sector of the arts, if you lack passion for what you do, you would have left already. So it is the passion for the arts and for social development.
But I'm glad that the issue of perceptions and suspicions around the ability and capability of arts organizations to manage funds, and I think I'm hopeful because you are already tackling that from your PhD thesis, from a management side of things. So after 17 years of work, and now you studying it and writing on it, I'm sure that the thesis on its own is going to address some of those concerns, and hopefully people and you working with a team of young communications people, you also use the opportunity to disseminate the findings of your thesis in a theatre format. So I'm actually looking forward. I'm actually looking forward to see how your findings are going to be packaged and presented in a theatre format. So
they will try. Let's see what they will do.
So this has been fascinating. So I want to end with Sepan. I'm going to do the unusual. He's the founder and the executive director, but you are the young person here. What is the future of Savannah Trust?
Yeah, the future of Savannah Trust, I will tell you this, it's very bright because it's coming from a leader who makes you believe that whatever you are doing is impactful. A lot of young artists, like what he had alluded to, are believed to be fly-by people. And we have also seen that among others of our peers that are so young that when there's no money within the sector, you'll be like, no, let me switch professions. Let me try tobacco. Let me try to work in a supermarket, But a lot of the young people that you find in this organization are people that have been there for over the past 5 years. Why? It's because we have been told that, yes, you are artists, but what you can do goes beyond this house, this room, this space. It's national, it's international. And this is something that I think as young people in these organizations, we carry with us with so much pride. So when I look at the future of Savannah Trust, probably this is going to be a global organization. I believe in the next 5 to 10 years, Savannah Trust will be working with global partners in the world. So this is what I genuinely believe, because our impact in Zimbabwe already is being felt, and we are one of the few arts organizations that can confidently tell you that we work in all the country's 10 provinces. So it means that Zimbabwe, we are known, but what's next after Zimbabwe? So I genuinely believe that the future is bigger and brighter for us, Savannah Trust, and the young people that are within Savannah Trust.
So we're talking to you in your capacity as communications officer, but let's end with knowing Sebastian. Who are you?
So Sebastian is a storyteller, is a theater lover, is a filmmaker, a videographer. I grew up in Bulawayo. That's where my family was. Then I left for university. I studied a bachelor's in arts in film and theater with MSU. Then I moved to Harare. And I think how I ended up finding myself at Savannah Trust is my first job within the communications office was for an NGO that was dealing issues around gender equality and child protection. And in that sense, I developed a keen passion for also integrating my knowledge of theater, film, with development work. That's when I then moved to Savannah Trust, and I've been there since, and I still see myself being here in the next coming years. Of course, probably maybe in a more developed position, and as you grow, you always want to enhance yourself. So that is hopefully what the future will bring for me as Sebastian. Yeah.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hopefully when we do meet again, I'll be talking to you, listening to you saying, my findings for my PhD are the following. That's what we were talking about now when we were talking about something else, and we veered to his work and his thesis that is about to submit. So my encouragement is I'm really excited to hear what you are doing and what you are saying. You're very articulate young men. My encouragement will be that you use this space in the arts, in communications, and if you want to develop yourself, you further develop yourself within that space. Because going forward, like I was saying, I think we are all beginning to realize the value and relevance of the arts sector in diffusing even some of the most sensitive situations. If we learn from football, for example, it doesn't matter how divisive the country is. When it's football, you are all, you all go and support maybe just that one team. The same applies to arts. Music is just one language that everyone speaks. So you actually are using arts now going forward to really work in conflict zones, in sensitive spaces where you are able to bring everybody together. So the future is really bright, like you said. So thank you so much for taking the opportunity to talk to us, Sebastian. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was Daniel Maposa, the founder and executive director of Savannah Trust, but we're also joined by Sebastian to talk on the communication side. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.